Hello, and welcome to another lesson from Level Up Mathematics. In today's lesson, we will be exploring the slope formula and how we can use the slope formula to find the slope of a linear relationship. Now, in previous lessons, you've learned to find the slope by finding the ratio of the change in y to the change in x, or rise over run. In today's formula, we'll be actually looking at the formal definition of the slope formula and how to use it. Let's start with example 1. Use the graph of the linear relationship to answer the questions. In part A, it says use a right triangle to find the ratio of the change in y to the change in x. So we're going to make a ratio here, and I'm going to abbreviate change in y to delta y. That's just a shortcut way of writing change in y. And I'll abbreviate change in x to delta x. Now, we're going to use the right triangle shown here to get the change in y, and I want you to notice that we're starting at 3 and going up to 5 on the y-axis, so that is 2 units. And the change in x, we are going from x equals 2 all the way over to x equals 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4. That is 4 units. Now, if we reduce that, we would reduce it to 1/2. So our ratio of the change in y to the change in x is 1/2, or 1/2. In part B, they want you to use the values in the ordered pairs. Using the values in the ordered pairs, how else could we find the change in the y values to be 2 units? So let me highlight our y values here. All right. So how could we use those y values to find the change to be 2 units? Think about that. All right, hopefully you said that you could subtract 5 minus 3 to get 2. All right, part C. Using the values in the ordered pairs, how else could we find the change in the x values to be 4 units? All right, let me highlight the x values here. We have 6 and 2. All right, pause the video and try problem C on your own. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you said that you could subtract 6 minus 2 to get 4 units. All right. Now, because when we're finding the ratio of the change in the y to change in x, we're subtracting the y values and the x values, this is how we get the slope formula. So let me give you the formal definition of the slope formula. If a linear relationship contains 2 ordered pairs, x sub 1, comma y sub 1, and x sub 2, comma y sub 2, the slope, or m, can be found using the formula m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now let me highlight this formula because we're going to be using this on the problems that follow. All right. Now, in short, here's what this formula means. On the top of the fraction, you're going to be subtracting your y values, and on the bottom of the fraction, you're going to be subtracting the x values. So let's look at how this works in practice. So in example 2, it says find the slope of the line passing through the 2 points. And in part A, the 2 points they've given us are 2, 2 and -4, -2. So the first thing I want you to do is label these ordered pairs. So this would be x sub 1, y sub 1. And that simply means first x value, first y value. Our second point would be x sub 2, y sub 2. That simply means second x value, second y value. All right. Now, looking back at your formula, on the top of the fraction, you want the y2 minus the y1. So look at your ordered pairs and see that y2 is -2 minus y1. Well, what is the value of y1 in this problem? Well, it is 2, so that goes on top. On the bottom of your fraction, you're going to take x sub 2, which is -4, and subtract x sub 1, which is positive 2. Now we're going to simplify this a little bit. Now, if it helps you, or if you're unsure of working with your negative numbers, you can use a calculator for this part. So if I were to just put the top of this fraction in my calculator, negative 2 minus 2, that would give me negative 4. So this is a negative 4. On the bottom, I would type in negative 4 minus 2. Whoops, I didn't type that in right, did I? Negative 4 minus 2, and that gives me negative 6. Now, your calculator will reduce this for you. Negative 4 divided by negative 6. It gives it in decimal form, but we want it in fraction form, so just push the little fraction button to convert it to a fraction, and that will give you positive 2/3. So the slope of the line passing through 2, 2 and negative 4, negative 2 is positive 2/3. It's going up 2 over 3. All right, let's try another one. In part B, the line passes through negative 1, 4. So here's our x1 and our y1. And 3, 0. So there's our x2, y2. And we want to find the slope of that line. So on top of the fractions, we're going to subtract our y values. Subtract the y values. So the second y is 0 minus the first y, which is 4. On the bottom of the fraction, we're going to subtract our x values. So our second x value is 3 minus our first x value, which is negative 1. All right, so we'll go to our calculator. 0 minus 4 goes to negative 4. And then 3 minus negative 1, positive 4. Now you can divide that. Negative 4 divided by 4, and that will give you negative 1. There's your slope. All right, pause the video and try problem C on your own. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. On the top of your fraction, you should have put your second y value minus your first y value. On the bottom, you should have put your second x value minus your first x value. So 6 minus 0 was 6. Negative 1 minus negative 3 was positive 2. And when you reduce that, you should have gotten 3. All right. Check your answer with mine and correct anything that you got wrong. All right, pause the video and try problem D on your own now. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. On the top of your fraction, you should have put your second y value, which is 2, minus your first y value, which is also 2. On the bottom, you should have put your second x value, which is 1, minus your first x value, which is negative 3. So 2 minus 2 is 0. 1 minus negative 3 is 4. And 0 divided by 4 is 0. So check your answer with mine. Correct anything that you got wrong. All right, example 3. In example 3, it says each table represents a linear relationship. Find the slope of each line represented by the table of values. So in this problem, instead of giving us the 2 ordered pairs on the line, they're giving us several points on the line. But we still only need 2 points to use our slope formula. So when you're given a table of values and the problem tells you that it is a linear relationship, that means you can choose any 2 values in the table to use. Now, I like to use what's called friendly points. Friendly points generally don't have negatives or decimals. Now, sometimes you can't avoid using negatives or decimals, but I like to try to avoid negatives and decimals if I can. So in problem A, we have a table of values. I want to pick 2 friendly points. So to me, in this problem, it's fairly easy to find 2 friendly values, 0, 6, and 1, 2. So what I'm going to have you do now is write them down side by side, 0, 6, and 1, 2. All right. Once you have them written down, you can use your slope formula to find the slope. Okay. So we'll set this up. We'll take our second y value, which is 2, and subtract our first y value, which is 6. And on the bottom, we'll take our second x value, which is 1, and subtract our first x value, which is 0. Now, I want to show you how you can put these in the calculator all at one time. It'll save you a little bit of time, but you start out by pushing the division bar. And what that does is it creates a fraction in your problem. And then you just type in the top 2 minus 6, and then on the bottom 1 minus 0. And it will take you straight to the answer. So the slope of the line represented by this table would be -4. All right, look at problem B. Now, in this problem, it's going to be a little bit harder to find friendly points. I don't think I'm going to be able to avoid a negative. So I'm just going to choose 0, -2. And then I have a real friendly point right here, 1083. So I think I'm going to use those 2 points. Now, once you've chosen, and honestly, let me just say right here, you could pick any 2 points in this table. You do not have to choose the ones I chose. The crazy thing is, we'll all still get the same answer. Okay? So these are the 2 points I'm going to use, and I like to write them down side by side before I do the slope formula. Okay? All right, so then I'll draw my fraction bar here, and I'll take my second y, which is 83, and subtract my first y, which is -2. So on the top, 83 minus -2. And then on the bottom, I'll take my second x, which is 10, and subtract my first x, which is 0. Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to push my division button, and that makes a fraction for me so that I can type this in. 83 minus -2 and 10 minus 0. And it gives me an answer of 8.5. Now, in this particular problem, it is okay to leave my slope in decimal form because the original problem had decimals in it. So my slope is positive 8.5. All right. So far in this lesson, we've learned to find the slope of a line that passes through 2 points. Then we've learned to find the slope of a line that's represented by a table. Now we're going to talk about using the slope formula if we're given a graph. So look at problem A. Example 4, problem A. Find the slope of the line using the slope formula, and then confirm your answer by finding the ratio of the change in y to the change in x, or rise over run. So if I'm going to use the slope formula, I have to identify 2 friendly points on this line. So one of them is given to me right there. 0, 80. So let's write that down. All right, now I'm going to follow this line down. I'm trying to find differently. Oh, here's one right here. So we need to see what that point would be. And that would be 5, 40. All right, once you've identified 2 friendly points, now you're going to use your slope formula. So 40, second y minus first y, 40 minus 80. On the bottom, second x, which is 5, minus first x, which is 0. Come over here, push your division bar, 40 minus 80 over 5 minus 0. And that would give me a slope of -8. Now that's using the slope formula. The second thing they want you to do is find the ratio of the change in y, or delta y, to the change in x, delta x. All right, to do that, remember, we have to draw a right triangle. So I'm going to start with the bottom. I always start with the bottom, and connect these 2 points with a right triangle. Okay. Now, I want you to notice that in this graph, the y values are going up by tens. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Okay. The x values are going over by ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay, so when I'm getting my change in y, if I'm going by tens, this is going 10, 20, 30, 40. So I'm going up 40. Now I'm going to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I went left 5, so negative 5. And if we divide 40 divided by negative 5, we're going to get negative 8. So we got the same answer whether we use the slope formula or the change in y over the change in x. All right, look at problem B. We have two ordered pairs, negative 6, negative 5. So I'm going to write that down right here. And positive 6, positive 1. So those are the points they want you to use in this problem. Since they already labeled them for us, we'll go ahead and use those 2 points. Okay. Now, I want to get the second y, which is 1, minus the first y, which is negative 5. So 1 minus negative 5. On the bottom, second x, which is 6, minus the first x, which is negative 6. All right. I'll come over here to my calculator, hit my division bar. 1 minus negative 5 on the top. 6 minus negative, 6 minus negative 6 on the bottom. And that gives me 0.5, which is the same thing as 1/2. All right. Now we're going to confirm our answer by finding the change in y, delta y, over the change in x. So remember, to find the change in y over the change in x, we start at the bottom point and we draw a right triangle. And then we count the units. So we are moving from the bottom point, we're moving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're moving up 6 units. And then we're moving to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're moving to the right 12, so that's positive 12. Now, if we reduce that, we're going to get positive 1/2. Now, problem C looks a little weird, but we can still use our slope formula to find the slope of this line by finding 2 friendly points. So for my friendly points, I'm going to use this one and this one. It doesn't matter which 2 points you use. You could pick different points from me and you'd still get the same answer. So first, let me write down the 2 points that I chose. I chose 2, 60 and 4, 50. Very friendly points to use. So to find my slope, I'll take the second y, which is 50, subtract the first y, which is 60, over second y, which is 4, minus, second x minus the first x, which is 2. Now come over here to my calculator, hit the division symbol, 50 minus 60 on the top, and on the bottom, 4 minus 2. And that reduces to a slope of negative 5. Now, if I want to get the change in y over the change in x to confirm it's the same answer, I'll connect these points with a right triangle like this. Okay, and notice our y values went up by 10, and then they went left 1, 2, so negative 2 because they moved left, and that also reduces to negative 5. Now, if you ever get different answers, then that means you messed up on one of them. Just go back and double check your work. Usually, it's just a problem with a negative number. All right. In problem D, I want you to pause the video, try problem D on your own. You're going to get the slope twice, once using the slope formula, and secondly, by using the ratio of rise to 1. So pause the video and try this problem right now on your own. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. Now, what I did was I wrote these 2 given values down side by side. You definitely don't have to do that step, but I think it helps. And then I took the second y value, which was negative 1, and I subtracted the first y value, which is 3. Then I took the second x value, which is 6, and subtracted the first x value, which was negative 6. Now I'm going to put this in my calculator. Negative 1 minus 3 on the top, 6 minus negative 6 on the bottom. That is a fraction, a decimal answer. So I'm going to convert it to a fraction, and it converts to negative 1/3. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the ratio of the change in y to the change in x. So I'll use a right triangle. And notice I'm moving up 1, 2, 3, 4. So my change in y is 4 units. And then I'm moving to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I moved left 12. So that's negative 12. And then I can reduce that. And it does indeed reduce to negative 1/3. Now, check your answer with mine and correct anything that you might have gotten wrong. And that concludes today's lesson using the slope formula to find the slope of a linear relationship.